and welcome to Washington DC for a Motor Week and Lexus special. We're going to be featuring 3 models from the range: the IS200, the GS 430 and the brand new SC 430 convertible.
Once upon a time, the only small executive cars that you'd find yuppies in were German. They were either BMW 3 Series or Mercedes C-Class, and the closest that the Japanese could get to that was a Nissan Primera with leather seats. But all of that changed when the Lexus IS200 was launched. More style than you could shake a mobile phone at, and with a build quality that had put many of the manufacturers to shame. But the big question is, does the IS200 make the grade in this class? Does it do what it says on the tin? In this class of car, you've got your work cut out from the start. Firstly, you need to be priced under 20 grand to hit the company car list, and you also need to have enough flash factor to attract your young tycoons. Well, from the moment you get inside your little Lexus, it's clear that they've thought long and hard about making it different. The dashboard layout is certainly not run-of-the-mill. There's more switches and buttons in here than you'd find in the cockpit of a 747. We've got everything in here: electrical windows, mirrors, air conditioning, CD player, airbags all round. And although it's very flash, it might be a bit too busy for some. The most striking feature is this instrument dial that looks a little bit like an expensive watch that you'd find on the wrist of our young executive. Very stylish, very clear, and very different. In direct competition with the bigger BMW 3 Series and Mercedes C-Class models, we've got a straight 6 2-litre engine under the bonnet, producing a little over 150 brake. Now, despite being extremely smooth, I was a bit disappointed with the pace and pull of the car. 0 to 60 is quoted at 9.5 seconds, but you'd really have to rev hard to get anywhere near this. But the saving grace is the gearbox, because it is as smooth and precise as they're going to find in any of the German rivals. Now, if you're expecting a luxury drive in this Lexus, you might be surprised, because it's actually more of a sporty car than a luxurious motorway cruiser. It's got rear-wheel drive, like the 2 German rivals, but it sits firmer on the road, and round town with passengers, it might actually be a bit too firm. But if you get a chance to get it out on the open, twisty roads, get your tie off, then you're in for a treat. The steering is responsive and pin-sharp, as are the brakes, and it just makes you long for that extra power that you know the chassis could handle. Overall, this car is everything I'd expect it to be wearing a Lexus badge, and it is a worthy competitor of BMW and Mercedes. And apart from the build quality and the obvious style, the fact that it isn't a BMW or Mercedes is actually sales figures, because I reckon that people are looking for an executive car that's a bit different. Now, later on this year sees the launch of the IS300, which is going to give this car its much-needed power boost. They're going to replace the 2-litre engine with a much more powerful 3-litre unit. There's no word on price yet, but it'll definitely take it out of the sub-20 grand exec bracket. But for many of you, this won't be a problem, because by then you'll be a couple of steps closer being Bill Gates' neighbour.
Ever since Toyota's posh brand Lexus was launched 11 years ago, they've had a bit of a hole in their range. Well, quite a big one actually. They've had nothing to go head-to-head with the European V8s from Mercedes and BMW. Well, now they have, with this, the newly launched GS 430. On first impressions, the GS 430 hardly jumps out and says, "Oh, buy me!" The styling is typically Lexus. In other words, it's big, it's bland, and about as interesting as a new chest freezer. Then again, Lexus have never really sold on their looks, have they? But as my mother used to say if I was dating an ugly girl, it's not what's on the outside that matters, it's what's inside. So, she's big, let's be honest, she's plain, maybe she's got a heart of gold. Well, we've got everything in here that we need straight away. We've got plenty of wood and acres of leather. We've also got loads of buttons that would indicate we've got plenty of kit, and the sexiest sat-nav setup I've ever seen on any production car, I reckon. There's no doubt as well it's got the usual incredibly high standard of fit and finish we'd expect in a Lexus. The only downside is, like a lot of the girls I used to date, oddly enough, the one thing it is lacking is any kind of passion. Once you get the thing rolling, the first thing you notice is the first thing you don't notice. Noise. There isn't any. In fact, if it wasn't for the rather garish rev counter showing a measly few hundred revs, you wouldn't know you were running at all, you might be rolling. Engine and gearbox are actually a great match. It does shift effortlessly and smoothly up and down, but you can kick down as and when you need. It doesn't get in your way, it's unobtrusive, which is what you'd want in a car like this. Under the bonnet is an impressive 4.3-litre V8, and should you be in a rush for the board meeting, the Lexus can catapult you to 60 in around 6 seconds. Good news as well is there's room inside for just about everyone on the board. Top speed, conditions permitting of course, is 155 miles an hour, and thanks to the legendary Lexus reliability, there should be no worry as you pile on those motorway miles. I've discovered something. There is so much adjustment on the driver's seat in here. If you can't get comfortable in this, then I think you belong in a circus. This is great. Its natural habitat, of course, is always going to be the motorway. Big 6-laners quite happily cruise up and down in straight lines all day. Start to challenge it a bit, though. Even on A roads, I'm not talking country roads, and it gets a bit wallowy. You do feel you're sitting on top of a giant Japanese souffle. It's not that the Lexus is going to fail to do its job. It will always do so and will probably never ever break down in 1,000 years. It's just that when you get out of some of the European ones, there's always the possibility that you'll feel you've had a bit of an experience. The Lexus, it'll have got you there, you'll have been comfortable, it won't have rattled and your feelings won't have fallen out, but it won't have been an experience. It's just a car. Despite its late arrival on the scene, the GS430 is looking set to cause a bit of a stir amongst its European counterparts. Because not only does it offer very good value for money, it also offers something not really available to drivers of 5 Series and E-Class, and that is a little touch of individuality. Okay, so ultimately it may not be the most desirable or stylish of the bunch, but it is an attractive alternative. Despite all of these good points though, if you were spending £37,000, is this the first car that you would think of spending it on? No, me neither.
Oh, say, can you see the new Lexus SC? Well, you can right after the break when we've got one of the very first drives.
Hey Blondie, park the car and don't scratch it.
It would be very rude not to. In the UK, if you want a motor that says you've made it, you'll probably pick a Porsche, Jag or a Merc. But in America, the car they all want to drive is a Lexus. The car that says, you the man. So what better Lexus to be driving in the States than the latest one of them all, the SC 430. And this is the first convertible to come from Lexus, and it's set to be their flagship model across the range. Now they claim that the purpose of the SC is to be the finest all-round luxury convertible in the world. In other words, it's the dog's pips without a roof.
We don't stop. We don't stop. We don't stop. We don't stop. We don't stop.
Now the IS200 has shown us that Lexus can break away from their reputation as being manufacturers of luxury barges for sweaty fat cats. And with the small executive class still feeling shell shocked, they've now turned their guns onto the likes of the Jag XK8, Merc SL and Porsche 911. Now if you're going to compete with the cream of Europe's convertibles, you can have only one engine, a V8. Well, Lexus have taken their 4.3 litre unit from the big GS and LS models and shoehorned it into the SC chassis. Now you'd think that 280 brake horsepower would be enough to make this car perform, but not content with that, they've also manufactured a new 5-speed intelligent automatic gearbox. Now what that's supposed to do is anticipate your gear changes and make them a lot smoother. Now whether it is manufacturer's flannel or not, I have got to say that the changes are extremely smooth, and when you put your foot down, the power is instant. Now when Lexus was designing the very first model all those years ago, they actually sent a team of Japanese designers to an American country club. Now this was so that they would feel like their eventual customers, young American executives. Now whether that meant that they became very rude, lost all dress sense and all idea of comedy, I don't know, but they certainly did suss out how to do interiors. And I've got to say that the feel inside this SC, well, it's just the best interior that I've ever experienced. Some of the materials might be a bit of an odd match, but that aside, the feel is just so solid. And it's things like the opening for the stereo, the cup holders, really special, lets you know that you're buying something very exclusive and very expensive. So what about the roof? Well, a car this classy ain't going to have a creased up bit of cloth in the boot. Oh no. The SC 430 is due to go on sale in the UK at the end of June, with prices set just over £50,000, quite a bit under the competition. But if you are tempted to rush out and buy one, you'll have to wait till next year, because all 250 UK models were sold at the Geneva show. There you are, Chief. Park it up with you, mate. Been trying to find a space all day. You're welcome. Thank you.
It's been 10 years since Toyota launched the Lexus LS 400, a car which shook the European luxury car makers to their socks. After all, Toyota was a mass-market car maker, and, the argument went, mass manufacturers just can't give a luxury model the degree of individual attention those buyers demand. Wrong. In fact, the LS 400 was quieter, it was smoother, it was better air-conditioned, it was better riding, and it was faster than all its rivals. The only thing it lacked was heritage and charisma, and that was something that all the money and engineering know-how that Toyota threw at the Lexus project just couldn't provide. Well, now there's a new Lexus, the LS 430, and after 10 years of awesome success in the luxury field, well, perhaps Lexus has established its own charisma and heritage. Not that they've changed the appearance of the car that much. Lexus always had a bland, anonymous-looking front end, and that's carried over onto the new model. Lexus's engineers were obsessed with cutting CD values and wind noise, and that's resulted in the lowest CD value in the market segment. The new headlamps are rather in your face, you could say, even ugly. But the appeal of the big Lexus to its discerning buyers was never on face value. They knew what lay under the skin. But it's inside the Lexus that the almost fanatical attention to detail and engineering excellence really shows. In things like the leather trim, the perfect Californian wood, the brushed aluminium, and this wonderful instrument panel that lights up from virtual reality and which created such a stir with the first LS 400. The list of extras just goes on and on and on. There's a door closer system, no more slam doors that fold in.
Yes,
the front seats are between sport and high
electric
mode.
memory,
Rear passenger
rear
controls
seats
for the
with a
vibra
navigator
navigator
for air
system fitted
conditioning.
as standard.
A
CD auto changer,
Intelligent
electrically multi-adjustable front in the front,
electric
rear
rear
window
lumbar
blinds,
support,
rear view mirrors dip for reverse for the driver to
LCD
adjust the front
touchscreen in the
passenger
dashboard.
seat. Steering column electrically adjusts. And it's fitted with the most sophisticated hi-fi system you've ever seen, designed by Mark Levinson, well-known Californian manufacturer of incredibly expensive hi-fi systems. Now, in the past, he would never put a system in a car because he always said, well, the ambient noise is so high in a car, you can't tell the difference between excellent hi-fi and truly great hi-fi. But in the Lexus, he thought it was calm enough and quiet enough in the cabin for you to really appreciate one of his systems. Let's see if he's right. Well, after a few miles, you have to say he was right. It really is uncannily quiet in here. You can't hear the engine. There's very little noise coming back from road surface or bumps and thumps. You really do rather want the radio or the CD on to block out the eerie silence. Now 4.3 litres, the V8 churns out over 280 horsepower and a stonking 417 torque figure. Push your foot down and a computer that the press release describes as a brain the size of a small planet surges the car away with seamless gear changes until you suddenly notice you're doing instant disqualification speeds without even knowing how you got there. And if you were unlucky enough to hit anything, well, a plethora of airbags explode from literally every corner of the car to make sure that you and your precious occupants remain unhurt. It doesn't roll or pitch. The increased wheelbase give it even more stability over the old model. The steering is absolutely pin sharp. You can place this car to an inch, and the traction with the big fat tyres is really extremely good. You can't get over the fact that it's a big heavy limousine, but even so, you can hustle it along at really surprising speeds on these country lanes. You have to say this LS 430 really is a truly great car, and it's a notable step forward from the old LS 400. It's still relatively bland and innocuous, but that's what people who buy these big Lexuses like. They don't want to advertise their wealth with a three-pointed star, a flying lady, or even a leaping cat on the bonnet. They're people who value their creature comforts for what they are and not for what they represent to other people. Sounds a silly thing to say, but at £50,000 or thereabouts, this Lexus is great value, especially when you compare it to the price of what used to be called the best car in the world.
Now in the UK we're quite snobbish when it comes to style, and we're far more likely to buy something that's European rather than Japanese if we want to make a statement. Bang & Olufsen over Sony, Rolex over Seiko, and Mercedes over Lexus. But in America, they've got a completely different view of things, because Lexus not only outsells Mercedes and BMW, but it does all that while still maintaining the image of a luxury brand. Now inside the RX300 you'd be forgiven if you thought you were driving a hearse, because black is the theme here. We've got a black dashboard, black door panels, black door inserts and black seats, but we are saved with the quite classy aluminium inserts on the centre console and around the electric mirror and window switches. Now the dashboard itself, whilst not being the last word in style, it is extremely well laid out. All the instruments are very clear, very easy to read, and the switch gear is everything you'd expect from a luxury car. But the only niggle I've got really is the indicator stalks. They look like they come straight out the Toyota Yaris parts bin. On the outside, there's no getting away from the fact that this Lexus is big. Not only is it long, but it's also very tall on those 16-inch wheels and tyres. And as far as the looks go, well, I don't think we'll be winning any beauty pageants, but to criticise it for that would miss the point. I mean, if you want to sell lingerie, you don't get WWF wrestlers to model it for you, unless you're into that sort of thing. If you want glamour, buy a sports car. Now, ever since Lexus launched the first car, the LS400, they've had a reputation for producing very quiet vehicles, and this, the RX300, is no exception. There's almost zero traffic noise around town, and it's only when you get out onto the motorway and the wind starts buffeting these fairly big wing mirrors that you get any noise intrusion. But if it gets too bad, just turn up the fantastic stereo system. Although the RX300's no slouch, performance is brisk rather than frantic. The 6-cylinder 3-litre unit pumps out 280 brake horsepower, enough to propel the car from 0 to 60 in a little over 9 seconds, and onto a top speed of 112 miles an hour. Hurrying the car along hurts the fuel consumption though, and you'll be lucky to see over 22 miles to the gallon. Now, with full-time 4-wheel drive and a reasonably stiff suspension, the RX300 is very smooth on the bends. Potholes, drain covers, they make very little difference to the composure, and it's only when you get onto some of the sharper corners that you notice a little bit of body roll. And that lets you know that although you're driving a luxury vehicle, it's not a saloon car. Now, another great reputation Lexus have is giving you shed loads of kit in your standard car. And at 29 grand, your RX300 is going to have driver passenger airbags, electric mirrors, windows, air conditioning, alloy wheels and a CD player. Now, if you want to pay a little bit more and go for the SE model, that's the one we're driving today, and it'll set you back 32.5 grand. You also get cruise control, electric sunroof and the lovely heated leather electric seats. Now, whilst Lexus may have spent the last 3 years fine-tuning the RX300 for Europe, the competition haven't been standing still. In fact, the very popular Mercedes ML leads the sales figures in this sector, and BMW have just launched a 3-litre version of their brilliant X5. However, with the 3-litre X5 costing around 33 grand and Mercedes ML weighing in at just over 30 grand, the RX300 looks a good buy, especially when you consider the levels of equipment the car boasts over its rivals. Now, whilst it may be a while in the UK before Lexus has the badge recognition of BMW and Mercedes, that is about all they're lacking, because on all-round ability, specification and price, they've got a lot to have the Germans quaking in their lederhosen. Well, that's it from Lexus, but be sure to watch next week as Ken Gibson's been to Finland on the trail of the new Nissan X-Trail.